Let's start with the weird question. If we've been fighting inequality for decades, why is it still winning? Governments raise the minimum wage, billionaires pledge to give back. We have foundations, scholarships, CSR campaigns, tax codes, and yet, somehow, this red chart looks like it was drawn by someone who wants to exploit the masses. Here is what you're looking at. The bottom half of the world owns 2% of total wealth. The top 10%, they hold 3/4 of it. And the top 1%, they've collected more global wealth than the entire middle class combined. That's not inequality, that's architecture. Now maybe you think that this is just how capitalism works. But if that's the case, why was inequality actually shrinking for decades after World War II? From the 1940s to the 1980s, many countries, including the US, UK, France, and even India, saw wealth gaps narrow. Growth was high, wages rose, and average people gained real security. So what changed? The short answer is policy. The long answer is deregulation, deunionization, Reaganomics, Thatcherism, globalization, austerity, and the global embrace of trickle-down economics that mostly forgot to trickle. And here is the most important and maybe darkest part. This isn't just about money, it's about power. Who gets heard, who gets protected, who gets to shape the future. Wealth inequality isn't just some economic statistic. It's the backbone of inequality everywhere else. So if we are living in the wealthiest era in human history, how did so many people end up owning so little of it? Let's break that down. We tend to think of inequality as a gap, the rich and the poor, side by side, but that's not how it works. Inequality is more like a moving escalator, except it's tilted, and one side's being greased. Because once someone gets a little ahead, a better school, a better neighborhood, a bit of inherited money, the system starts reinforcing that lead. And over time, those small advantages turn into massive ones. Sociologists call this the Matthew effect, after a Bible verse. To those who have, more will be given. Basically, if you start with something, anything, you are more likely to get more. Not because you're better, but because the game rewards those who are already playing it well. It starts early. Children from wealthier families get access to better schools, safer streets, healthier food, and more support at home. They are more likely to graduate, go to college, avoid debt, and land better jobs. Meanwhile, kids from poorer families often face the opposite. And once they fall behind, academically, financially, and socially, it's incredibly hard to catch up. The distance grows. Now multiply that across a generation. One family builds wealth, another gets stuck. And because wealth itself creates opportunity through connections, safety nets, time, and space to take risks, the gap becomes not just economic, but generational. And here is the thing, this has nothing to do with billionaires in bunkers hoarding gold. It's just how systems behave when they are left alone. They reward the winners, and they keep rewarding them. In physics, it's called inertia. In economics, it's inequality. So if inequality accelerates on its own, what happens when the rules of the game are designed to push it even faster? Here is a comforting lie. The economy is fair. The rules apply to everyone equally, and if you just work hard enough, you'll eventually get what you deserve. Now here is the less comforting reality. The system isn't neutral, it picks sides, and it usually sides with the people who already won. Let's take taxes. For most of us, taxes are pretty straightforward. You work, you get paid, you pay your share. But for the ultra wealthy, taxes are optional because they don't earn income, they grow assets. Stocks, property, private equity, and in many countries that kind of wealth is taxed far less, or not at all, until it's sold, sometimes never. And then there is inheritance. In the US alone, over $84 trillion is projected to be passed from one generation to the next over the next few decades. And most of that, it will go to the richest 10%. So while one kid starts adulthood with 6 figures in student debt, another starts with a trust fund, plus a few family contacts, and a summer internship at dad's law firm. But it goes deeper. Laws, zoning codes, lobbying power, they are all tilted. Banks are more likely to approve loans for people with assets. Corporations use shell companies and legal loopholes to reduce their tax burden. Politicians often listen more closely to donors than to voters. And none of this is illegal. In fact, that's the point. It's been designed to be legal. Inequality isn't an inevitable outcome of capitalism. It's significantly influenced by the choices we make, the policies we enact, the protections we establish, and the benefits we allocate. The system hasn't malfunctioned, it's operating as designed. The pressing question is, are we satisfied with this design? This reframing acknowledges that while capitalism provides a framework for economic activity, the degree of inequality observed is largely a result of human decisions and policy choices. But if the rules are not great, why do so many people still believe the game is fair? At some point, someone probably told you this. If you work hard enough, you will succeed. It's a nice idea, motivating, clean, and in a way, it's foundational to how many of us see the world, especially in capitalist democracies. But here is the not so great part. That idea works a lot better for people who already started on second base. We like to believe that talent rises to the top, that the smartest, most disciplined people win. But when you look at the data, a different pattern appears. In the United States, for example, a child from a wealthy family with below average academic performance has about the same chance of graduating college as a child from a poor family with top grades. Same outcome, completely different inputs. So why does the myth of meritocracy persist? Because it feels good. It rewards the winners with a sense of earned superiority, and it comforts the rest of us with the promise that success is still possible if we just grind a little harder. But here is the flip side. When you believe everything is earned, it also means that failure is deserved. If someone is poor, struggling, or unemployed, the logic says they just didn't work hard enough. It turns systemic issues into personal failures. This doesn't mean hard work doesn't matter. It does, a lot, and it sure makes a difference. But pretending is the only thing that matters lets us ignore the built-in advantages that hold some people up and holds others back. So if the system favors the already advantaged and the culture tells us they deserve it, what happens next? Well, let me tell you that it gets even worse. Okay, so by now you might be thinking, alright, the game is rigged. But now we know that. People are talking about inequality. We've got research, reports, TED Talks, and charts that look like roller coasters designed by sociopaths. So why isn't it getting better? Well, I think that we've gotten better at identifying the problem, but worse at solving it. Part of the problem is that the forces we are up against aren't the same ones from 50 years ago. Back then, inequality was driven by things you could at least see: tax policy, union busting, financial deregulation. But today, it's like the system learned how to hide in the code. Let's talk about technology. Automation didn't just replace factory jobs, it reshaped entire labor markets. AI, algorithms, and platform economies have created new kinds of winners and a whole lot of losers. A small group of companies and workers benefit massively from scale, while others are left cycling through unstable gig work or trying to retrain for jobs that didn't even exist 5 years ago. Globalization was supposed to help everyone, but in reality, it mostly helped the people who were already doing well. Factories moved overseas, wages at home stopped growing, money could move around the world faster than people could, and most of the profits ended up with those who were already at the top. Then there is financialization, the shift from making money by producing stuff to making money by moving money. Since the 1980s, the financial sector's share of GDP has grown dramatically. But most of those gains, they've gone to asset holders, not workers. Today, wealth isn't just created, it's engineered. And during crises, moments when you'd expect inequality to shrink, or at least pause, the opposite tends to happen. During COVID, US billionaires increased their wealth by over 2 trillion, while over 10 million people fell into poverty. Stimulus programs were generous, but so were stock buybacks. And somehow, the same companies that laid off workers saw record profits. So why does the progress keep failing? Well, because most of our fixes are treating the symptoms, not the structure. A wage subsidy here, a tax credit there, we try to redistribute after the fact, rather than redesigning the way the economy generates wealth in the first place. And there is something else, something quieter but more insidious. Even when we try to reform the system, the winners have the loudest voices. They found the campaigns, they influence the algorithms, and often they believe, truly believe, that they earned every bit of their success. Because that's the power of the myth we just talked about. This isn't about blaming individuals. It's about recognizing that modern inequality is self-reinforcing in ways that are complex, adaptive, and disturbingly efficient. It doesn't need conspiracy. It just needs momentum and a lack of meaningful resistance. So if inequality keeps growing even when we want to stop it, maybe it's time to ask a harder question. What would it actually take to reverse it? By now, you've probably noticed a pattern. Things aren't just unfair. They are unfair by design. The system rewards wealth, multiplies, and shrinks the space for everyone else. But here is the thing. This didn't just happen. Inequality wasn't backed into nature. It was built through laws, policies, and choices, which means, with enough pressure, it can be rebuilt too. Let's start simple. One of the most effective tools for reducing inequality is something we already have: progressive taxation. When the people who earn or own the most contribute more, societies get more stable, schools improve, infrastructure expands, healthcare gets better, and no, economies don't collapse. Back in the mid 20th century, top tax rates in countries like the US and UK were over 70%, sometimes even 90%. And during that time, those economies boomed. It turns out taxing the rich doesn't kill innovation, it just limits hoarding. Next is wealth transparency. Right now, we don't just have inequality, we have invisible inequality. A lot of wealth is hidden in offshore accounts, shell companies, and complex trusts. And without transparency, it's almost impossible to design policies that address the full picture. Imagine trying to plug a leak without knowing where the water's going. Then there is the idea of universal basic income, UBI, giving everyone a base level of financial security regardless of their job or income. It sounds radical, but pilot programs in countries like Finland, Kenya, and Canada have shown real promise: better health, less stress, and more freedom to make good decisions. Because when you are not constantly worried about survival, you tend to think more clearly and contribute more meaningfully. I also have a full video about universal basic income, and you can watch it right here. But money isn't everything. Empowering workers through stronger labor protections and better working conditions also plays a massive role. When workers have a voice, inequality shrinks. This isn't just theory, it's backed by decades of data. And here is the bonus. When people feel respected in their work, they also tend to work better, which last time I checked is supposed to be the goal. Now you might be thinking, okay, but will any of this actually happen? And the honest answer is not unless there is pressure, because power doesn't usually give itself away. It has to be challenged, organized, pushed, and that doesn't mean pitchforks in the streets. But it does mean public will, political action, and consistent pressure to rewrite the rules. None of these ideas are magic. They won't fix inequality overnight. But they point to a different kind of system. One that rewards success without punishing failure. One that sees dignity not as a luxury, but as a baseline. And the most hopeful part is that we've done it before. The only real question is whether we'll choose to do it again. So I will let you with a question. If inequality isn't natural, and fixing it is possible, what does that say about the world we've chosen to live in? So that's that. If you appreciated this video, you can equalize the algorithm a little bit by hitting the like button, subscribing, and sharing the video with your friends. If you have any friends that are willing to listen to these left-leaning ideas. Because hey, in this system, attention is currency, and I hope you just got a good return on yours. So, thank you and see you in the next video.